All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. And here we are, December.
Woo!
And winter is here. And I'm wondering how you are doing up there in December, Toronto lockdown mode.
Oh, yeah. Well, we are in lockdown for the next 20 days or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit hard. I think everybody's struggling. I think people are getting tired, but
yeah. Okay.
That's why everybody's putting up their Christmas lights early,
That's right.
I think.
Okay. So this is my second question to you is, do you have the Christmas tree up yet?
I do not. I need to do this. So usually I go to Calgary to see my family for Christmas. But this time I've actually decided not to go. So now I get to actually decorate. So it's gonna be good.
Well, I was at Target the other day and because my husband thought we needed 2 more sets of lights outside. So our little town is actually encouraging all the houses to have lights because they're going to put all of the houses on a map and then people can drive around and look at Christmas lights based off of this map. And so it was the first year I went to Target and all of the Christmas lights were sold out and I couldn't. I'm like, what? It's just what happens. People stay home and their houses and everything close to them becomes more beautified and more lovely. So that's how I'm looking at the positive of this, Anne, is that we get to enjoy more of the beauty of home.
Oh, that's awesome. In Canada, we call that store Target.
Target. It's the French version. It reminds me of the Christmas Story, the movie where it's the box is fragile and he says fragile. Like, that's awesome. Anyways, Anne, I'm very excited about our episode today because we are going to talk about a topic that it's really important to me because we're going to talk a little bit about somebody who is kind of highlighting and emphasizing the next generation, and specifically the next generation of our girls who are persons of color and kind of looking at their worldview and how they're going to change our world. So I'm very excited about this because I think that they're the future of our world. So we're going to ask her about that if she thinks so too. But so I want to welcome Khristi Adams to the podcast. And Khristi is out in Pennsylvania working at this wonderful boarding school called The Hill, which we'll talk about. And Khristi is an author and an advocate. And she wrote this book called The Parable of a Brown Girl that came out last February. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about just the younger generation here. So welcome to the podcast, Khristi.
Thanks for having me.
How is life out in Pennsylvania right now?
Quiet. Yeah.
That's a good word.
I'm back and forth. My family lives in New Jersey. My parents, my sister. So it's about an hour and a half from here. So I was actually there for Thanksgiving. When I'm here, I'm at work, I'm on campus. Yeah. So when I'm not here, I'm there. So it's weird. So I know how life is at the boarding school. I think, actually it is quiet post-election. Pennsylvania is quiet.
Pennsylvania was in the highlight, or it was in the limelight for a little bit too long there, right? They're like, just leave us alone.
Very quiet, yeah.
Right. Well, Khristi, tell us a little bit about yourself and just a little bit about your history, your education, and then maybe how you got to The Hill, how that happened.
So sort of start off with the fact that my family's in Jersey. So I actually am from New Jersey and grew up there. I wasn't born there, but I was raised in Jersey. And so I call myself a Jersey girl through and through. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, so not far from here. For my undergrad, and I majored in advertising. So I didn't really do anything with that outside of just try to hone those skills to market any of the personal stuff that I'm doing, like personal projects. I went to Princeton Seminary for my master's. So my Master of Divinity, I went there. But right after college, I worked at a residential treatment facility for young girls. With severe emotional difficulties. And I always use that as sort of like the catalyst. I even wrote about it in the intro of Parable of the Brown Girl. So I always use that as the catalyst for where I felt my initial calling, my initial sort of like vocation. I don't know if I knew what that was at the time. I just knew I felt like I had a passion for young people. But I always say it sort of started there. Prior to that, I think maybe I did have that passion, but I was young. So I think I felt like, oh, well, of course I want to work with people that are young because I'm young. But when I was at that treatment facility and those girls and to see everything that they were going through, I felt like when I left there, I felt like I had a commitment to those girls, those specific girls, even to this day. I left there specifically saying like, I'm going to leave and help girls or help young people like you all. So when I left there, I actually moved back to New Jersey and I worked at a community development corporation as a youth specialist. And when I was there, I felt like I felt a call to ministry, but not a conventional one, that was like in a church or anything like that. It was really more, well, I want to do ministry, but I also want to work with young people, and I don't know what that's going to look like, so I'll go to seminary, that type of thing. So when I went to seminary, it wasn't with the intention of being a pastor or doing anything formal. I think I wanted to weigh my options there because I felt like I came to the faith as a young person because I grew up in a community that was where my mom and my dad were very active in their local church, and it was very focused on young people. But it was young people in connection to the community. So it wasn't really like four walls of the church. It was really, our ministry extends to the educational system and extends to helping those that are less fortunate, So that's why I went and worked at the Community Development Corporation that was connected to the church. So that there was no difference between the community and the church, how I grew up. So I had that in mind when I went to seminary, and I felt like, maybe at some point I can merge the two. I just didn't know what it was going to look like. And I got really, really interested in social justice, ethics, on top of my interest in working with young people when I was in seminary. When I graduated there, I went on to work I was hired at my church as a youth director. And again, we still had the Community Development Corporation, so I was now sort of over the entities of that. Still pretty young, didn't really know what I was doing. I think he knew that too when he hired me. But I worked there for about 3.5 years. And it's funny because it was maybe about 10 years ago, around this time, that CNN was doing a documentary called Black in America. They were doing the second part of Black in America. It was called Almighty Debt. It was about financial literacy, about Black churches and how they help the community financially, etc. So they focused on our church, and they did 3 stories. And one of the stories was myself and a young man that I was working with, who was a high school student, and just our relationship and helping him to get into college, etc. So that sort of continued to spill over. I say all that because it was very consistent with the career path. I just didn't know at the time. I wasn't able to string it all together at the time. And then from there, literally right after that, I moved to Los Angeles, California. I got a job as one of the campus pastors at Azusa Pacific University. And so there, it was very different living in California. It was one of the best experiences, the most life-changing experiences that I had. I was able to travel to these different colleges and speak and meet all these different people, i.e. Clint Baldwin, who you had as a guest when I spoke at George Fox University at the time. So I was there for about 3.5 years or so, maybe 4, hard blurry. And then I moved to, I wanted to come back to the East Coast. I felt really far. Like, I love the community that I made there, my friends. I love them to this day. I hate that I haven't been to California this year because of the pandemic, but I try to go back pretty often. My old boss is one of my best friends. So I go back and spend time with him and his family once or twice a year. So I moved to the East Coast. My family, my friends, everything that I've known has been out here, and it was becoming harder. So I got a job as a sort of a part-time job as a chaplain in residence at Georgetown University. And while I was there, I somehow, seems like I stumble into these jobs, but there was their Protestant chaplain left literally like a few months after I got there. So then they hired me as the interim Protestant chaplain for the law center and for the university. So I was working as a chaplain in residence. I was working at the law center and the university. So I had 3 jobs at Georgetown. I enjoyed my time there. I just could not afford to live in DC. And so after maybe 2 years there, I really wanted to stay. I just could not afford it. And so I decided to go if they weren't going to come up, and came back to New Jersey, worked for maybe 2 years with my pastor, my church, helped out there, and then got this position here at the Hill. I did not want to move too far from my family. They're about an hour and a half away, which isn't too far, and it's a straight shot. So I got this job. I saw a position as a chaplain here. And then I picked up some roles since I got here. So I'll actually be in a new role in July as Dean of Spiritual Life and Equity. So it's sort of a fused role of diversity, equity, and inclusion and spiritual life that I'll be doing starting. Well, I'm doing it now, but the title will kick in in the salary next summer. So that is where I am as far as my career is concerned. But book-wise, there were other things that have happened along the way, whether it's books or plays or short films that I did when I was in California. So there have been other things that I feel like I've been able to dive into creatively since then.
So, Khristi, what I love about your story is that, like, it sounds like, okay, you've been to all these different positions in different places, right? I mean, that the residential treatment center kind of kicked it off. But then you have like the chaplaincy, you have all these. So what I see happening to you is that you knew generally like what you wanted to do, right? Like you knew what you were called to do, what you had a passion for, and it looked different in different settings, right? Even different geographical locations, it was different. But it sounds a little bit, I'm wondering, was it on the job where you learned this is what I'm really enjoying doing? Was it time of reflection where you kind of set aside time and said, hey, this is what I know I want to do? Like, what is that? One of our hero traits, Khristi, is intentionality. And I'm picking that up very strongly in you, which is knowing ourselves and then letting our gifts and strengths be the things that kind of pull us forward to change our world. And so I'm wondering, like for you, was there any kind of internal process for you? Or was it just, hey, I enjoy this, and more experiential?
All of that.
All of it.
Everything you said mixed together.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I do feel like I've been very intentional. I know that if I cannot give 100%, if I cannot be true to who I am, whether it's in a job where I'm making money or even if it's like a little side gig or something, then I can't commit to it. Yeah. And I've known what my passion and my gifts are. And if I feel like, especially as far as jobs are concerned, if I feel like it aligns with that, and I feel like I can do it, and then I feel like the rest of it will fall in place. Yeah. So if it just has those basic, like, for example, like I said, young people, even though some of the positions haven't necessarily included, that demographic, but for the most part, right? If I'm able to, live out my gifts in some way, if I'm able to give, if I'm able to be able to give some sort of creative freedom, if I don't have to suppress my spiritual side, so like, for example, like I said, the Hill is it's not a Christian school. It's not even a spiritual school, right? There are some things in place that have been in place here since I got here, but since way before I got here, like a religious studies requirement, or they do have chapel, but it's very, it's very general, very world religion, it's academic. But at the same time, they still value the position, like when I was interviewing, I could hear that they respected my role and who I am and wouldn't ask me to be any other person other than who I am, even though the school isn't necessarily, completely in line with everything that I believe or do or value. Yeah. Then I feel like I can be true to the role. while I'm in those, then I can reflect, right? I can ask myself if, if this is what I feel like I'm really supposed to be doing, or can I be doing more? And I think that's even how this new position came about. I sat with my supervisor and we talked it through. I didn't even think about it. But one of the things he said to me, I'm fascinated by. He called me in for a meeting. They were getting ready to put out a position for a diversity, equity, and inclusion director. And he said, "Listen, Khristi, I know you're not interested in applying for this position." And I was like, "You're right, I'm not." And he's like, "And I know you're not interested in it because you need time to write your books. You love writing. You this, you that." He starts naming these things. And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. And he's like, "Okay, how can we create something that can give you room for all of that and just still allow you to soar?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
So that's how it came about.
Yeah.
And that's not just what I need with jobs. That's just what I need in life.
Yeah, it's being mission driven, right? So this title of just generally diversity, equity, and inclusion, like this is a growing title generally, right, in our world today. And but this has been on your heart for a lot longer, I think, than it's been like on the radar of organizations as well. And even your book, right? So we have so much to talk about, but I do want us to kind of hop into kind of where your passion to tell the stories of young Black girls came from. So let's start with your book, Parable of a Brown Girl. Tell us a little bit about that, and then just like why you wanted to do that, why that was kind of the heartbeat of time.
Parable of the Brown Girl tells there's 7 stories that the book shares of my experiences over my career, over my life, with young Black girls, with specific ones, and basically what I learned, right? How they changed my life. It gives a little bit of their story in the beginning, but then it shares some of the wisdom that I got from them, that they shared with me, whether it was them sharing with me directly, communicating it, or just from what I got from them just in general, just their presence. So I talk about cultural truths, I call them, that come out of that. And the reason why I say cultural truths is because I realize that a lot of, in this book, I'm specifically talking about young Black girls. So the cultural truth that I usually get is something for Black women, adults, like, wow, we've been going through this for years, we've been going through this for centuries, and these young girls are going through it. What does this mean for us? So that's the cultural truth. And then, of course, the ministry side of me always has to sort of have that other piece in there. And so the latter part of the chapter is some spiritual truth that I got from them that I really think could be universal, right? It's not necessarily for one particular, even though it comes from I come from a particular faith background. I think it's a spiritual truth that could be universally applied. I struggled with this because there were only 7 stories that I was able to tell in the book. There's so many, over my career and life that I've met. So narrowing it down was difficult to an extent. I really focused on the girls that either I really, really remembered. If you say which one sat with you, there's some that just come up automatically. But I had been, particularly in the last several years, been really, really wanting to share their stories. When I had that 2-year sort of hiatus after I left Georgetown, I mentioned and was saying, I went back home, I was trying to figure things out, and I was working at my church. I was also working as a part-time counselor at a counseling center called Christian Wellness Center. And these parents would be bringing their teenage daughters, that was really why my mom's best friend is the president of the counseling center. So let me put it that way. And so she's like, we're going to bring you in as like a pastoral counselor. And so she's like, we really need some help with these young people. And we just keep getting youth in here. And so I would sit. So for those 2 years, that was only supposed to be a little short 6 months that I was going to be home. It turned into 2 years. But I worked there for those 2 years, and it would just be these one-on-one conversations, no audience, no performance. It's just one-on-one. And we would talk through life, whatever it is that they were going through or whatever was on top of their head. And once they do trust you, because it takes a little bit for kids just in general. And so it would be fun once they wound up trusting me and wanting to come to therapy and say, oh my gosh, I was thinking about this all day. I couldn't wait to get here to tell you what happened in school. Let me show you there was a fight, whatever it was. I would leave those sessions. I would drive home and just be like so full. I would feel like, I'm getting so much out of this and I can't explain the feeling that I'm having right now. And I've had these experiences with girls before that I've worked with, but they've been these one-off settings. I've been busy working, as a campus pastor or whatever else, plus having the relationship with them. But in these settings, I was just counselor and it was just our together. And I'm like, nobody's going to hear these stories, these girls, not just the stories, but how they're able to talk themselves out of these situations, out of challenging situations, how they're able to figure out, how to maneuver these school fights and, whatever it is that they're going through in their home life, and not having the vocabulary. When I say resources, I don't mean financial. I just mean like the faculties, right? Not even always just the intellect. That type of support. Whereas now I can go in my head and pick the words that I want, but they're not always able to articulate it. Yet they're still able to draw some sort of conclusion. They're still able, so they would say things to me that were like so powerful, just sort of nonchalant, whatever. And I would drive home and just be like, man, if I ever get an opportunity to have a platform to put these girls, to center them, then I'll use it. So.
Wow. I actually heard about your book, but I haven't had a chance to buy it or read it, but I'm excited. And I hope our readers do too. Like, run, go get the book. And it's so cool how it just came out of relationship and how everything, I feel like your life is just so integral and relational. Like, I feel like you either move into a role because it aligns with your values, or you align the role to your values. You know what I mean? You're like, yeah, this role is great, but it's like you're putting your own stamp. You're making your mark kind of in these different areas, and especially probably on these girls. And the word that came up for me was the word resilience. Like, that you're building resilience for these young women who are trying to navigate through life and whatever is thrown at them. So my question is, like, what are the unique challenges, do you think? Like, why are you specifically targeting the parable of a brown girl, right? Mm-hmm. So what is it particularly of that group of young women that we need to know?
Yeah, when I do these, and thank you for your words, and when I do book talks, now in the pandemic it's online, but I always, I usually start off and I show these headlines about this demographic of girl, and I wish I had it up right now. It's, this study finds that young Black girls are suspended at higher rates. This, 185,000 Black girls went missing in such years, and nobody seems to care. These sort of negative headline after negative headline that specifically talk about young Black girls. And I always show that in the beginning to sort of highlight that all groups, yes, have their struggles. This particular group is the one that I'm honing in on intentionally, right? Because of this sort of struggle to be seen, there is the real sort of they're like invisible, right? They're not just marginalized; they're completely unseen. And I hear it. I hear it in their stories, and I not only hear it in their stories, I see it in how other people like relate to them.
Can I ask, Khristi, is that like, do they recognize that too? Like, do they feel invisible and unseen, or is that something that you're just kind of picking up on?
I think the older they get, yes. I was interviewing, so one of the girls I use in the book is the first chapter. She's 9 years old. But it goes up to like 18. The older they get, the more they realize it. This summer I taught, it's not a camp, it's a conference called At the Well Conference. They have it at Princeton University in the summers. This summer, of course, it was online. And these girls from all over the country, Black girls, but also Latina girls, but mainly young Black girls from all over the country, Nebraska, you name it, New York, and they also have one for boys, but they come and they usually stay for like 2 weeks. But I taught them, it's like classes they have, and so I taught a critical reading class on Parable the Brown Girl, and I had 48 girls in my class, 48 to 50 girls. And to hear them, I mean, you would have thought it was Parable of the Brown Girl. You would have thought it was quite literally the same stories in this book. I mean, I couldn't get over it. Like, and I shouldn't be surprised. That's the thing. I'm surprised every time that to hear them talk about how they feel unseen, right? The comments people make about their hair, their skin complexion, I mean, it's the same stuff. And this is girls all over. As I mentioned, Nebraska, like, you live in Nebraska, you live in Iowa, you live in California. And they were like, they were so, they wanted to keep in touch after with each other because, they were like, we didn't know. We thought we were the only ones that felt this way, and so I've never been in a room. A lot of them go to predominantly white institutions, so they're not really in mixed schools for some reason, this particular group. So they have felt alone, but when they share stories about teachers, how teachers relate to them, and things that comments were made to them, it's all the same. But when they're younger, the reason I said the 9-year-old, they have a hard time. They sense it, but they brush it off. You know what I mean? So they're not able to articulate it the way that the older girls are.
Khristi, this makes me very sad, because that is the age where their worldview and their foundation for themselves is built, right? And so how then do these girls, like, I don't know if you or others like you, what does it look like then to rebuild a foundation where these girls start to realize they are seen, what they say and do does matter?
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So let's go back really quick. I wish this was a video because I would share my screen and show you. Did you see that? It was it early this year? This year seems like it was 10 years. So I don't know if it was this year.
Yeah.
But it was a young girl who the woman was doing her hair. I think she was like,
it was this year.
5? You see it? Was she 5 years old?
Maybe at most.
Maybe.
What was it? Tell me about it.
She's getting her hair done. And she says, "I'm so ugly." She was, the woman was, had the video camera like in her face while she's doing her hair. And she's just, the woman that was doing her hair was just talking normal. And then the girl all of a sudden is like, "I'm so ugly." And then the woman was doing her hair, she stopped and she said, "What?" And the girl says, "I'm so ugly." And she says, "Don't say that." And it was just a woman, it wasn't her mom. I think her mom was videoing it. And she's like, "Don't say that, don't say that." And then all of a sudden the girl just starts boo-hoo crying. Right? I mean, just like, like just crying. And the woman turns around and she's like, "You are beautiful. Don't you say that." So eventually it went viral. Michelle Obama, of course, said something to the girl, and then Tamron Hall had the girl on the show. So it's really cute to see what has happened. But she was so young, and it sparked so much conversation. I brought that up because you're right, they're young. It happens at these formative ages, right? Where she was saying her hair was ugly, her skin is ugly. She didn't like the way she looked, and a lot of it had to come due to the fact that she was Black, right? Now, what winds up happening is that it happens so young that we wind up having to redo these narratives. And that's what I try to do in Parable of the Brown Girl. The point I try to make in the book is that we need to reclaim these narratives for these young girls And it starts with our vocabulary. It starts with how we communicate with them, what we say to them, how we say, all of that, the images that we show them, that's why they say things like representation matters and all these, Kamala Harris is, she gets, what do you call it? When they won, whatever. And all of a sudden you see all these pictures of people saying, oh, brown girls, you can be this too. It's so important to them to shift that narrative so that they can see themselves in all different shapes and colors and the rainbow of the colors that they are. But it starts so young that you have to reverse it. And for me, my advice always is, because as adults, I say that for us, we didn't really have that necessarily growing up. And so it wound up being like well into our like after college that we've had to reverse stuff, right? And say, wait a minute, my hair is this, my hair isn't bad, it's really what I'm loving seeing now is that teenagers now, it's starting much earlier where they're reversing that. And so I think for all of us, just being really mindful, being mindful of like dolls that you get your kids, you know what I mean? Like my parents were very, very intentional about our Barbies and, the dolls that we had looking like me, but my friends didn't have that per se. My friends who looked like me maybe had one black doll, so just even those types of things are important.
Yeah. It's like a multidisciplinary approach almost, right? But can I key in on one part of that, which is like when you were telling the story even of the girl who was, I'm ugly, like that quick counter of words, right? Like the power of words. And so Khristi, like our definition of a hero is somebody who inspires people through words, deeds, or by who they are to be better and to do better. And I think like we can't underestimate the importance of what we say. A lot of times I think we jump to like something, we have to do something big instead of like the verbal validation that causes, like helps people really like, no, you are beautiful. Sit in that statement for a minute. Talk to us about, you're a chaplain, and talk to us about words. I mean, just kind of retraining ourselves into like being people who validate people and who compliment people and who, kind of just use something simple like that.
Yeah. I think it's even more important than actions. I mean, not more, but equally, I put it on the same plane, words, particularly when you've heard, like we take advantage of our words. And that the unfortunate thing is that we're living in a society now that does not understand the importance of words, right? And the power that they have. But to tell a young girl, no, you're not ugly, you're beautiful, like you said, and just say, sit on that. Sometimes my sister, she's in her mid-20s, she'll say something, I'll say, don't say that, you're this. It's so important. Why? Because they're hearing all these other messages constantly. We're hearing negative messages subliminally too, whether it's in music or people just say it randomly in conversation just because it's just so widely accepted. It's so important to be intentional about the things that we say and how we communicate with one another. I remember my best friend, she had said to me, she said, I didn't even really think about my body. I didn't say anything about my body. It wasn't even until I was in college and she was doing theater and a director, somebody told her she needed to lose weight or something. And so from that point on, it's been a thing. Right. But it's funny because I said, oh, yeah, I don't remember that. You've never talked about your body when we were teenagers. Like it was never a thing, It's not that you weren't trying to be, healthy or whatever it might be, but it just wasn't central until somebody said something to you, So that's so important. I always tell the story about if I have to preach, I use like this example of how, I used to play basketball a lot when I was in high school, and I remember, you know, in the newspaper, they had the 3-point shooters, like the all-time scores for 3-point shooters in the county. So I was like up there. Yeah. And I remember one of the girls I played with said, well, you shoot with 2 hands, right? This was like midway through the season where, you know, you shoot 2-handed. I'm like, no, I don't. She's like, your shot is off. So from that point on, I stopped. I mean, I was not on that list. Every 3-pointer I shot was like bang, bang, bang. But prior to that, my mentality was I can't miss, right? But it wasn't until somebody said something to me that I started to miss. It's just so, I mean, it's scripture, you know, for lack of a better example, life and death are in the power of the tongue. And it is so true.
Well, I am sorry, because that's, I just want to say, like, going back to your 2-week camp that you had, where you had those 50 young women, and then they realized, oh, it's actually a broader societal culture context and not just me and my weirdness. You know what I mean? Like, that actually happened to me too. So I grew up in Calgary in Canada, and then my family, we actually grew up in a really multi-ethnic neighborhood. But still, I just think that all the messages that we hear through even media and just what beauty looks like, and this is what normal is, it just affects you, and you don't even know. It just permeates just your own understanding of who you are, your understanding of beauty, and what is normal and what's abnormal. So, or who is in power and who is not in power. So then, yeah, that actually happened when I actually was in Atlanta, Georgia I was in a campus ministry, and they got all of our the Asian staff together, and I bawled for like 5 days, but it was good cry, because I'm like, no way, you too. What? And it's just, I felt like I belonged, like I felt normal. So I love your book, that you are actually reinforcing what should be. You know, you're centering like that these young women are actually powerful, beautiful, and what they and their context is and should be more widely known, and bringing it from the margins and into the light.
So good.
Yeah. So what do you think about when you say that potentially your stories or young Black women are marginalized, and so then I think you're combating it through your writing and through your speaking, but what is your primary message what do you hope that people will really come away with?
Oh man. You know, I spoke to a group this summer, and they were, it's a Presbyterian church, mostly older white women. And they were like, we know we're not your demographic. And I'm like, no, you are my demographic. You were exactly who I was thinking of when I wrote this book. The book is it's about young Black girls. It is not for young Black girls. I try to make that clear, even though they read it, they can read it too and get something out of it. But they know what they're going through. That's not the point. You know what I mean? It's not to enlighten young Black girls. I think for them, it's more to affirm them, right? And to say, oh, me too. Oh, somebody is going through this too. But for me, it was really about the one that, you know, is maybe needs some more insight into these young girls' lives, right? And maybe break it down just a little bit more in plainer terms. As to what they're experiencing. So I want people to start to see and notice. That's really it, you know, to see and to notice and to be intentional. And people don't have to go start movements. You know, that's not really the point of this. It's to pay attention to, I said to that group on Zoom, I said, it's to pay attention to the one Black girl in your class, you know, not to, you know, single her out per se, but to pay attention in the sense that, you know, you thinking that you're just treating everybody the same, you know, it's not enough, because she's not the same. You know what I mean? So there's a fine line between treating her different, right? Treating her the same, and acknowledging the uniqueness of her presence in that class. There's a complete difference. And so there was, one woman's like, I'm a teacher, and I just, she was talking about how they were, I don't know what the girls were taking pictures for, but they had like different tights that they had, and so they had nude tights. You know how nude is only one color.
Mm-hmm.
And so how she brought in tights specifically for that girl, and how the girl that just opened up, that made her trust her more. Because she said, I got you specific tights. This is nude for you. Mm. That seems so minor to people, right? Like people think, oh, like I said, you don't have to start a movement. It's not about starting an organization for Black girls. It's about doing things like that. That is huge. I said to her, the fact that you were able to acknowledge that, or if you all are taking a class trip and everybody's swimming, there's a reason why she's not swimming. It's not just because she can't swim, if she can or can't. It has to do with hair. There's like little things like that. But seeing, going back to the tight situation example, she saw her. See what I mean? That said, I see you.
Exactly.
And she felt seen in that moment. She didn't feel ostracized, marginalized, or made to feel like she was some sort of unique unicorn, right? It was just sort of this subtle, I see you. And I would love to see so many more of those moments.
Yeah. Well, I love that, Khristi, because it validates the fact that it's just one person at a time that really does have a snowball effect, and then eventually causes great change and different ways of seeing things. And but I have to say, Khristi, like, I am very excited about like the future, because I know, like, in my own life, and I've seen this over and over, where our pains and our wounds make us stronger. They can make us stronger, and they make us people who are more empathetic, and people who see things differently, see the wrongs in the world, right? Like the margins and where injustice is happening. And so, these girls who have an opportunity to have, to see like that they matter, they're beautiful, or they're wonderful. They've also experienced this hurt, right? And this marginalization, but then they also have the ability to have like this great empathy and this great way of seeing the world that maybe sometimes we can't even see. So I don't know about you, but like I feel excited about the possibilities that come even from pain. The pain itself is terrible, and the injustice is terrible. But boy, I mean, what can be birthed out of that? I mean, just priceless, I think. Do you have any like concluding story that you could share with us of a girl that you have met that has kind of, just has gone through the process of a little bit of transformation and just is doing marvelous things or seeing the world in amazing ways?
Let me see. There's one that comes to mind that I wrote about in chapter 8 of the book that I met here at the Hill, or chapter 7, excuse me, that I met here at Hill. And she has since graduated, and very unique young woman, unique in her personality, and has always felt disconnected from everybody, whether it's her Black friends or white friends or whatever. But I wrote her story. I said, hey, can I write about you? I really didn't intend on writing about anybody from here, because a lot of these relationships were ones that I had previously. And to see her sort of blossom, and when she read her chapter, she started to cry, because she said, I felt like, oh my God, like you see me, like you heard me. I've told my story so many times previously, and it's not even like this profound, deep story, right? She had parents who are police officers, so she feels like, she understands Black Lives Matter, but her parents are police officers, so she always felt like, she listens to Paramore, and she doesn't listen to sort of like the typical whatever, her hair is, she tries different things with her hair. She's just trying to figure it out, but it's been fun. It was fun writing about her. It was fun watching her just in relationship, and she'd be in here in my apartment, and there'd be times where she'd say, I hate my body. I'm like, don't say that, so watching that, and then at my book event, I invited her. Nobody knew what chapter she was or anything like that, but I invited her and maybe 2 other girls to sit on a panel for me for my book release party. And I had another girl who was the founder of this organization called Brown Kids Read. She interviewed us. She interviewed me, and then I brought the other girls in. And she said, I related to a lot of the girls in this chapter, but I tell you, chapter 7, there's something about chapter 7, you know. She said, that was me, you know, and all that. And so the other girl, she didn't say it was her, but she just sort of looked over at me, and I was like, you see, you know. And so that was a really sort of like powerful moment, and to see her sort of, nobody knew what chapter she was, but to see her taking pictures of everybody and answering questions sort of confidently, it was fun.
Oh, I love it. I love how marvelous. Okay, so Khristi, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I am at Khristi Adams. Okay. On Twitter, I'm at Khristi Lauren. And you can just go to my website, KhristiLaurenAdams.com. But really, you can just Google my name, and all those things will come up.
Good. Okay, and we'll put links to all those things in the show notes as well. But you know, Khristi, thank you. This is so encouraging to me because, you know, as we get into the Christmas holiday season here, and I feel like what would it look like if all of us found little ways to encourage people around us and the young people who have been marginalized or are on the margins, like through our words, through like simple ways, like even you said, like buying like a different color hose. Like, I love that, like creative ways. So I encourage all of you guys to think about ways that you can love on people this Christmas, and whether it's through writing a card or giving a verbal compliment, or something fun like the hose. But thank you, Khristi, for joining us. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. We hope you loved it. Give us a 5-star rating, share this with your friends, and we'll see you guys next time.